Bonjour tout le monde. Évidemment, je suis vraiment heureuse d'être ici avec mon nouveau collègue et un vrai ami de longue date, Paul Manley. So there's been a lot of interest in the fact that Paul Manley just had a landslide victory in Nanaimo Ladysmith in the by-election there. We're humbled by the amazing support of the constituents of Nanaimo Ladysmith. I'm committed to supporting Paul any way I can with the very short window he has to be the best member of Parliament they've ever had in Nanaimo Ladysmith. And it's a great pleasure for me to introduce him to you now. He is a strong community leader. I think you've probably read his bio. He's been a documentary filmmaker. You may not also know that he's been a champion for issues of local food, watershed protection, water protection, opposition to fracking, and has worked at the community level in things such as helping young people who are really up against it financially, finding employment. He's also worked on the board of the Federated Co-ops. He's a member of the local co-op board, which actually means he's on the board of directors of an organization that runs a refinery. So he knows a lot about many topics, and for that reason, since 2014, I think it is, he's served on my shadow cabinet as the critic on international trade issues, about which he has a tremendous degree of expertise, having produced a number of documentary films. So, with no further ado, c'est mon grand honneur de donner la parole à mon collègue, le nouveau député, presque nommé, le nouveau député de Nanaimo Ladysmith, Paul Manley.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. It's an honor and pleasure to be here to represent the citizens of Nanaimo and Ladysmith. I thank them for their vote of confidence. And I am going to be here working as hard as I can with Elizabeth May. She hasn't any idea what I'm going to say today because she's not telling me what to say or telling me how to vote, and I am here to represent the constituents of Nanaimo Ladysmith. We have some serious issues that we're facing in Nanaimo. Climate change is something that people are very concerned about. Our forests are dying, the cedars and firs in our forests and the salal. We're already on water restrictions. We've got water levels that are at August levels. So we're dealing with drought already in a rainforest that is turning to a savanna, and we could have serious problems with fires this summer. Last summer, people were choking on the smoke. It was affecting our healthcare budget. People were going to the emergency ward. It was affecting tourism. It was affecting insurance costs. It was affecting the forestry industry. So that's a serious issue that we face in Nanaimo Ladysmith. We also have an affordable housing crisis in Nanaimo Ladysmith. We've had a major homeless camp in our community, and there's problems with addiction and mental health with homeless people, and I've been working with people with diverse abilities, with disabilities in my community, getting them jobs and doing employment skills training with them. And out of the 60 people that I had in my program in the last 3 years, 6 of them experienced homelessness during the 15-week program. And that was because landlords were flipping homes and they suddenly found themselves without a place to live and not able to find an affordable place to live. And so we've had a major homeless camp in our downtown, but we've got homeless camps all around our community. And so affordable housing is a serious issue that I'm going to be working on, and also talking about what we do about making sure that people with mental health and other disabilities are taken care of properly in our community, and making sure that we have enough beds for treatment facilities for people that are dealing with addiction in our community. So those are some of the key priorities for me. I'm going to be working really hard with Elizabeth. She is an amazing leader. She's brilliant. Encyclopedic memory, and I can only hope to be as effective as she is in tackling the broad range of issues that Canadians and the constituents in Nanaimo Ladysmith are concerned about. So I will be working hard with Elizabeth to split up her workload, going to committees, attending committees, putting forward private members' bills, speaking in the House, doing whatever I can for the citizens of Nanaimo, Ladysmith, and Canadians, putting people and the planet ahead of profits. Thank you.
Can we ask questions now?
Oui, 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 nous sommes disponibles pour des questions. Malheureusement, c'est seulement moi qui ne peux pas français, mais questions are open for Paul or me.
So you asked, you said initially that he's anti-fracking, and I'm just wondering if that was a deliberate thing that you wanted to put in right away. Is this something you've pointed out about the NDP? Is this a way, do you think, that you're going to perhaps have the edge on the NDP, especially since Sven Robinson is talking about their climate change policy? So is fracking going to work for you? Anti-fracking.
Well, I think fracking is a serious issue. We just had in British Columbia a massive tax giveaway to 5 foreign multinationals. 5 foreign multinationals, 3 of them are state-owned corporations who call themselves LNG Canada. They're getting as much as $6 billion in tax breaks and incentives. We're building Site C Dam and hundreds of millions of dollars in transmission lines to run LNG Canada and the fracking fields. And we know that fracking releases fugitive methane, and it's 25 to 30 times more potent as a greenhouse gas over the 100-year period. That's the EPA figure. But we also know that it can be as high as 85% more potent as a greenhouse gas in the first 10 years that it's released. We are seeing earthquakes all over the northeast of British Columbia, and we know that that is also going to be releasing fugitive methane, and it's a serious issue. Once we build this fossil fuel infrastructure, we are going to be have demands from these corporations to keep those pipes full. And we have just signed the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. We have a Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement. And these corporations are going to be using the investor state provisions in those agreements to demand that we keep those pipes flowing with the fossil fuels, or we are going to be paying as citizens and taxpayers for the loss of potential profit, and that is what they will be coming after us for.
The NDP supports LNG. Is that an Achilles heel, do you think, for the NDP?
I just wanted to add something before I pass it back to Paul, because I don't know how many members of the Ottawa media know that when Paul refers to the earthquakes in northern British Columbia, these are earthquakes caused by fracking. So the combination of the threat to our groundwater supplies, the creation of earthquakes, the release of massive amounts of greenhouse gases, and building a fossil fuel infrastructure that we don't need, and damming the Peace River to provide, massively burdening the British Columbia taxpayers to provide electricity to LNG operations, it just is an extraordinarily damaging industry, and yet it's embraced by John Horgan, it's embraced by Jagmeet Singh, it's embraced by Justin Trudeau, and we're the only party that opposes fracking. We support the moratoria that exists, the moratoriums that exist right now in Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. We should not be fracking for fracked natural gas anywhere. And the big lie is that fracked natural gas is somehow different from other fossil fuels. The effect of fracking in natural gas means that LNG from fracked gas has the same carbon footprint as coal. So the big lie is that by getting British Columbia fracked LNG to China, we're somehow combating climate change because China will burn less coal. The atmosphere doesn't care. The impact of carbon is the same. So I'll pass it back to you for the rest of that question.
All right. Yes, this was a wedge issue for us in the election. And what we have is 3 parties, the 3 old parties. The Conservatives can't even agree to a carbon tax or minor adjustments to deal with climate change. The Liberals bought a pipeline that, they want to expand the oil sands, and the NDP are depending on where they are, they're either supporting oil sands expansion or fracked gas. And I think that this is, it's cognitive dissonance that you talk about climate change and you want to do something about climate change. We had the environment minister for the government going out to Canadian Tire and telling us how we can buy light bulbs and shower heads to as consumers to deal with climate change, but at the same time, the government is promoting and approving new fossil fuel infrastructure. And we need the government to step up and do the right thing, have the political courage to start to make these transitions, to stop providing subsidies to the fossil fuel industry, and to support the transition properly. We have companies in British Columbia like Corvus Energy that is, working with the Norwegians to make their ferry fleet run on electricity. And we don't have that in British Columbia. Why are we not using that technology in our own country? We have in British Columbia, Harbour Air. They have done all the research and development to make their seaplane fleet electric. They've got an electric seaplane that they're flying and testing. They're going to get that all certified through Transport Canada. They haven't received a dime of subsidy from the governments. And the governments continue to subsidize fossil fuels and not support the transition. Then they're just talking, and really it's no better than climate denial. It's climate action delaying, and it can't be left at the feet of consumers. It has to be the government that takes action and gets serious about climate change.
Well, I want to ask you about another issue that's been chasing you, which is the Israel, Palestine, and BDS. So can you clear the air on this? What is your position on BDS? What is your position on Israel, Palestine? And do you find yourself more comfortable in the Green Party than the NDP because of that?
I support the Green Party policy. BDS, Israel and Palestine, is not an issue for me. It's not something I've ever campaigned on. It's not something you're going to see me speaking on a lot. People confuse me with my parents, and I stepped up to defend my father back in 2012 because I was the only family member available to do that.
Tell what happened to your dad in 2012. I don't think everybody knows.
In 2012, my father was on a boat to Gaza with members of parliament from around the world, including European MPs who were Jewish, Israelis who were on that boat. It was a small peace mission to go to Gaza with humanitarian supplies, and he was seized off of, in international waters, off of Egypt and held incommunicado for 5 days. And I was the person who was home, who spoke for my father. I wrote a letter to the NDP, to the caucus, because my member of parliament would not speak for my father. The foreign affairs critic was not available to me, didn't respond to me at all. And I expressed my disappointment with the party. That letter was leaked to the media. And when it was confirmed that I had written that letter, that was that for 2012. 2014, they wouldn't let me run based on what I wrote.
Right, and that's what you've said. It's been based on what you wrote. Is that the only reason why they didn't let you run? Are there other?
Yeah, that's it. Like, do a Google search for me and see how much I've had to say on Israel and Palestine.
2 points, if I can.
Sure.
Whoever chooses to answer. It used to be a minor scandal when members resigned midterm to run for local office, become the president of a railway, become the president of a chemical company. All has happened in the 42nd, 41st Parliament. Is there any sort of policy or commitment in your caucus that a term is a term, that you will not resign midterm if something nice comes along and put the charge on to the taxpayer? Is a term a term? What's the policy?
My personal policy is a term is a term. When I make a commitment to the people of Nanaimo Ladysmith that I am going to represent them for a term, that is exactly what I will do.
Second point, we're given to understand that your party's very principled, not like all those other parties. So I want to present a plausible scenario. Your party holds some balance in the 43rd Parliament, has some influence. The Supreme Court comes back on the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, says Judge Ottenbright in Regina, one of the dissenters, had it right. That the provinces have jurisdiction over emissions, that Parliament, let alone Cabinet, cannot override a legislature by regulation. Your deeply held principles tell you that Parliament should go in what direction under that scenario?
Sure.
No, number one, it's an interesting scenario, not entirely plausible given the strength of the Constitution around issues of taxation. But what I would say is this: so far in the House, and I don't control how Paul will vote, so he'll decide. But On climate issues, I think we're completely aligned. Carbon pricing and getting rid of subsidies is an essential, preferable, I should say, foundation for many further actions. By itself, the government's current carbon price gets us almost nowhere towards meeting a very weak target, which is the current government target, which is the same one left behind by Stephen Harper. But in your scenario, what would we do? We'd look to the other tools the federal government has, a toolkit that Catherine McKenna has not yet opened, which is Part 4 of CEPA, the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, as written right now, lists carbon dioxide as a pollutant that can be regulated from every single facility from which it is emitted. So if you can't use a carbon price, which is, let's face it, from the free marketeer right-wing set of ways to approach pollution, we embrace it because it works, but it's not the only way to go. It was developed in the U.S. by Republicans who didn't want regulation. So if the federal government, in the face of a climate emergency that requires significant action, far more than we've seen proposed from any of the other parties, we regulate.
That sounds like coercion.
It's not coercion, it's
Against provinces. There will be
No.
provincial utilities affected by that.
It doesn't affect, in the same way that the federal government has always had the powers to regulate the effluents from pulp and paper plants. Forestry is a provincial area of jurisdiction. No one has ever made the argument that regulations against dioxins and furans coming out the pipe from pulp and paper mills are somehow provincial jurisdiction. We are having a quite serious level of confusion about what's federal, what's provincial, how much authority does the federal government have to regulate. If you want to say all regulations are coercion, I guess you could. We have rules that you can't employ children in factories. Nobody says that that's a bad rule. The rules to say the federal government can regulate pollution that might kill you is not something that anyone has ever challenged. I don't think it's constitutionally possible to challenge the use of regulatory powers by the federal government to save lives. We would also want to assert that I agree, I mean, the majority in the Saskatchewan Court of Appeal, and what you'll hear in every other court, I believe, is that when you look at the pith and substance of carbon regulation, it's about addressing an issue not only of national concern, but of global concern, and we have to do far more, not less. Ideally, you get the provinces and work on them one at a time. I was part of the effort to get binding, legally binding agreements between the federal government and the 7 eastern provinces back in the 1980s, so they would slash their sulfur dioxide emissions by half. It wasn't easy. It took negotiating one province at a time to get it right. And I don't doubt that in 2020, it'll be just as possible as it was in the 1980s to work with a federal government that's committed, as it was under Brian Mulroney, to get rid of the scourge of acid rain and get the United States to reduce their pollution as well. It's not as though we don't have some history in this country of addressing serious environmental threats. It was Canadian leadership that got us the Montreal Protocol that has led to the ozone layer is currently repairing itself because of what we did in 1987. And the provinces might not have liked it because some had chlorofluorocarbon manufacturing facilities in their jurisdictions. But leadership requires an educational base, a fact-based, evidence-based, we're listening to the science approach that does not presume that people who currently don't understand will be profoundly committed to clinging to their ignorance in the face of information. And I believe everyone can be educated on this. It's a critical threat to our survival, and we don't think that we should allow petty politics or wedge issues to get in the way of ensuring that Canada has a future.
Mais j'aimerais vous entendre sur une mise à jour sur vos discussions avec Mme Philpott et
Oui.
Wilson-Raybould. Est-ce
Oui.
que ça avance? Est-ce que vous avez eu des communications avec elle?
Oh, toujours, tous les deux, Jody Wilson-Raybould puis Jane Philpott, sont mes amis. C'est mon approche de travail dans la Chambre, de travailler avec les autres députés sans regard de le parti. À cause de ça, j'ai travaillé avec Mme Philpott sur le sujet de la maladie de Lyme. Jusqu'après, elle a été nommée comme ministre de Santé. Aussi, j'ai travaillé avec Jody Wilson-Raybould sur plusieurs des enjeux. Et j'ai un niveau de respect pour tous les deux qui était énorme. Alors, je les invitais de joindre le Parti vert, c'est clair, mais c'est à eux de décider. Actuellement, j'ai aucune idée qu'est-ce que sera leur décision. C'est pour eux de décider.
Ce matin, il y a mon collègue Christian Noël de Toronto qui publiait une histoire qui disait que des conservateurs songeaient à se ranger dans le camp vert. Est-ce que ça vous étonne de voir cette histoire-là? Qu'est-ce que vous interprétez là-dedans?
Oui, je ne veux pas lire cette histoire des conservateurs. On peut expliquer un peu
Qui
plus?
songeaient à quitter le camp conservateur pour se joindre au vert.
Oh, oui.
Qu'est-ce que vous lisez là-dedans? Qu'est-ce que vous
Oui,
interprétez là-dedans?
c'est pas bizarre. Le président de ma circonscription pour le Parti vert, nous avons je ne sais pas le mot en français, pardonnez-moi, les Electoral District Association. L'ancien président de l'Association pour Saint-Achille de Golf était un homme qui s'appelle Bob Mackay. Il est l'ancien président d'une circonscription conservateur. Aussi, l'ancien chef du Parti vert de Canada, Jim Harris, était dans son histoire un conservateur progressif. Alors, c'est vraiment possible que nous serons chez nous pour les membres des partis à droite ou à gauche parce que nous sommes vraiment pratiques dans nos politiques.
Mr. Manley, I just want to ask again about the NDP, because if we look at the federal NDP and not the BC or Alberta NDP, a lot of the things that you've been talking about today are things that the federal NDP also talks about: eliminating fossil fuel subsidies, the transition to a green economy, green jobs, homelessness as well, affordable housing, all these things. So, I mean, you mentioned fracking, but aside from that, how do you differentiate yourself from the NDP? I mean, you've said yourself, you previously were affiliated with the NDP, they didn't allow you to run.
Yeah.
So what are you going to be able to offer as a Green Party MP that you wouldn't have as an NDP MP?
Well, if you check out our policy book, Vision Green, which is at one of the top tabs on our website, greenparty.ca, is very comprehensive. It has answers to a lot of the policy that we have around making healthcare better. So, for example, universal pharmacare, but also universal basic dental care, which are things that will save money in the healthcare system. We are much more comprehensive in our approach to climate change and to environmental issues. Also, the NDP have abandoned a lot of their principles. I mean, they voted for bombing Libya, which isn't something that their policy book would give them a pass on. They voted for the Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement, even though it had investor-state provisions in it, which is something that I've documented MPs who voted for that agreement saying that they were opposed to. So I think, one of the key differences is that the way we behave in Parliament, we don't heckle, we don't use personal attacks, we stick to the issues, we treat other MPs respectfully, and we work across party lines for what's in the best interests of our constituents and for Canadians, and we also don't have a whipped vote. So Elizabeth can't tell me what to say, and she can't tell me how to vote. And so, in effect, I'm working with Green Party policy, which I support, but I am free to be representing my constituents and to follow my conscience and to follow the policies that I've been elected on. And so that's a key difference between us and the NDP as well. Jagmeet Singh is on the record saying he supports the Coastal GasLink pipeline and LNG Canada, which means, increased fracking. And as I mentioned, we're not going to be able to shut that down, because without paying a heavy price for that, because of the Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement, because of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And so it's about values and principles, and we have very solid values and principles in this party that I think go far beyond what the NDP have to offer. I read their policy book before when I was intending to run for them, and it was really I'm amazed by the work that Elizabeth May does. She's brilliant, she's hardworking, she's tenacious, but it was Vision Green and the policies that the party has put together that really got me excited about running Green. And my parents as well. My parents are both Green Party members and been out canvassing for me, and it was a process for my family. My parents were CCF members. They were at the founding convention of the NDP.
Tell what you did on your 16th birthday.
I canvassed with Tommy Douglas to get my father elected on my 16th birthday. So, I was an orange diaper baby. But my daughter isn't an orange diaper baby, so neither my granddaughter. You know, we need to move forward, and the Green Party policy is not just about the next election cycle or saying things that we need to say to get ourselves elected, like Site C sucks, and then approve Site C, or fracking's a terrible thing, and then, you know, promote LNG Canada. It's really a forward-thinking set of policies. Where do we want to be in 10 years, 20, 30, 40 years? What is the legacy we're leaving for our children and our grandchildren? And you know, when I was out canvassing and campaigning, I would go to seniors' homes. And, you know, people would talk to me about universal pharmacare and the cost of drugs and affordability and about pensions. But what I found that seniors were most concerned about was climate change and what we were doing for their grandchildren. Right? We are in a serious crisis. We can see it in Nanaimo and Ladysmith. We can see that, you know, our forests are dying, they're tinder dry, and we could be in for a major disaster in our region based on that. And so we're not just talking about climate change. You know, this idea that home energy retrofits by 2050 is a bold plan, that is an old plan. I've done 2 home energy retrofits already. I took a house that was built in 1910 and I turned it into an Energy Star. It is, you know, I hired people to help me to change out the windows, to insulate the walls, to put in a heat pump, and that building now is an Energy Star. And I took the miner's cabin at the back of the property. I got 0 subsidy for doing that, but I rented out to a senior who is on a fixed income, and I made it energy efficient for him too, because it's the right thing to do. This is old news. We need to get on to home energy retrofits now, and there's no reason why we can't bring those programs back to subsidize home energy retrofits and get buildings, not just homes, but rental units, institutions, hospitals, schools, buildings across Canada retrofitted in the next 5 to 10 years. That's what we should be doing. You know, 2050, we're waiting too long.
Yeah, I'll just say that Julie Van Dusen has a question, and just to clarify, in Nanaimo, in case you missed it here, but it got a lot of coverage in Nanaimo, Jagmeet Singh announced a bold plan, his words, to have all homes in Canada retrofitted by 2050, and Paul has covered that one. Julie, did you want for me or for Paul?
A couple of quick questions. The first one, are you running candidates in all 330
Yes.
ridings? Okay. Secondly, your husband's one of the candidates.
Yes.
So some would say...
I gave him a prize. No, didn't give me a prize. He's running in Mission Matsqui Fraser Canyon, which is 20,000 square kilometers in the interior of BC.
But some people are going to ask you, this could look like preferential treatment if he wins. You're going to give him a plum job like finance critic. Are you concerned about any challenges about having your husband, if he does win, in, you know...
Well, that's very, the riding is one that one would say, I think 338 just rated Mission Matsqui Fraser Canyon at a 2% chance of a win for John Kidder. So it isn't as though carved out for him one of the ones where we are looking at Victoria, where Russell Coy will be the next member of Parliament, Esquimalt Saanich-Sooke, where David Murner will be the next member of Parliament, downtown Vancouver. We're just looking at a very exciting possibility for West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country, since the incumbent Pam Goldsmith-Jones was
Placeholder.
So I've not given, what's that?
Shoved him there as a placeholder.
No, yeah. And John and I talked about it because I was very concerned about this. I couldn't be involved in anything to do with his nomination process. You know, I'm scrupulous. And when I ran for my nomination in Saanich Gulf Islands, I was opposed, and I had to sign off on the nomination papers for someone who attacked me nonstop for the nomination process. We're a fair-minded party, and I don't get involved in nomination contests. And John Kidder is a pretty spectacular candidate, so I actually think he's going to get elected in Mission Matsqui Fraser Canyon. But it's not preferential treatment.
Ms. May, you were asked about Ms. Wilson-Raybould and
Yes.
Dr. Philpott. Have you ever spoken to Mr. Weir from Regina Luban?
Yes, I did at the point that he was initially expelled from his caucus. We were seatmates, and I feel very badly for his treatment because he seems to me, I mean, everything I know about the story and everything I can find out, that's the kind of treatment of members of Parliament who've been chosen by their ridings and elected That's one of the things that I find quite wrong with the way Parliament operates. But he's very committed to things that make him really feel that he doesn't belong in the Green Party, and I agree with him. And I think it's stalwart of him to continue in the CCF without any CCF to support him. But we have nominated a candidate in Regina Leuven.
Yeah, can I just ask you one more quick question? So the Liberals and the NDP say, should you become more popular, there will be more scrutiny.
Yes.
So how are you going to, I mean, if you're anti-pipeline, anti-fracking and so on, what happens to jobs in the energy sector?
They become renewable energy jobs. They become, we're paying a lot of money right now to the oil sands industry to dig large holes, creating huge financial liabilities for the government of Canada. We're going to have to spend a lot of money, and those same workers are going to have to repair the damage. If you look at the orphan wells issue, which the Supreme Court of Canada just ruled that you can't walk away from your liability for an orphan well. And then we saw a company do just that, close down in mid-operation and kind of disappear and shutter overnight and disappear. It turns out, one of the, and I was recently on a cross-country town hall tour. I haven't quite finished it yet, but we've been to 23 communities since February, where I've just taken the train or buses to get to communities in Quebec, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, in what we've been calling the Community Matters Tour. And while touring Alberta with the leader of the Green Party of Alberta, who's Cree, Cheryl Chagnon Grey Eyes, we went to see communities where First Nations communities are leading on renewable energy. If you look across Canada, most of the renewable energy is coming from First Nations communities. But back to the orphan wells, First Nations community in Alberta is converting the orphan oil wells into electricity production from geothermal. And the biggest cost of geothermal is, of course, drilling. So we got these holes in the ground that can be producing geothermal. And the same people who are maintaining the drilling and maintaining the operation for oil could be maintaining the operation for geothermal. There will be, in terms of, if you look at our policies and programs, we favor full employment. And what I see happening in Canada right now as a member of Parliament, listening to businesses that come to me and looking at the labor market, what we have is a skills shortage. We have a worker shortage. We have people, whether it's airline pilots or mining engineers, you look across the board, computer technologists, nurses, mental health professionals, you look across the sectors, and including construction, we don't have enough workers to fill all the jobs we've got. We have a lot of temporary foreign workers filling roles where we need the work done. The full retrofit program for buildings in this country, and I've talked to the trade unions that do this work, that's 4 million jobs. They don't have 4 million workers to do those jobs. So we're going to have to really expand the job opportunities, internships, programs of all kinds, so that highly skilled union jobs are available to more people. I mentioned refineries for a reason. We also favor that as long as we are producing bitumen from the oil sands, it should be used in Canada in favor and displace the importation of foreign oil. We should have a plan, which the Greens do have, to go off fossil fuels in a planned fashion, which will maximize jobs in Canada in a transition. We fully support the call for just transition, that workers are not left out. But what I find over and over again is the politicians who mouth jobs, jobs, jobs aren't thinking about the workers. They're thinking about the profits of a handful of multinationals that need to wake up and smell the coffee, because there is no future in fossil fuels.
Miss May, I have a question on the...
Can you add that?
Yeah, I was going to add to that, because the people that are working in the oil and gas industry, what they have is transferable skills. And so, taking those skills and working in clean, green energy, what we've seen in the United Arab Emirates, where they don't call it the oil minister anymore, it's the energy ministry, they have gone big on renewables. And they're saying that not just in installation of solar and wind, but in research and development. And so they're saying they're getting 3 times as many jobs. They are good paying jobs. We should be doing the same thing in Canada. We have people with skills. We can place them, have them working in these kind of industries, and far more people are working in renewable energy right now than in the oil sands, and the oil sands are laying people off based on automation. So Suncor is laying off hundreds of people because they're getting auto-driving trucks. And so that's a bigger threat to workers in that industry than transitioning, I think.
Deb, so your next question?
Yeah, there's an organization called Operation Black Vote. They tweeted that they had met with the 3 of Canada's federal party leaders for discussions on Black community issues, and are still waiting to meet with you. So I wonder if you've heard from them and if you plan to meet.
My chief of staff is here. We always take meetings with organizations. Have you heard of Organization Black Vote asking for a meeting with me? Black Vote? Yeah. No. Well, I very much hope that they will meet with me. Yeah. Our policies are very strong on all issues of diversity, human rights, non-discrimination. So I didn't participate in the Vancouver Pride Parade last year until I met with the organizations that wanted to boycott, because Black Lives Matter matters to me. So I actually sat down with the leadership of Black Lives Matter Vancouver, and I adopted for our green team walking in Vancouver Pride Parade a T-shirt that carried the message Black Lives Matter, Green Party Pride, and it was able to have their permission at Black Lives Matter Vancouver to participate in a parade that they were otherwise boycotting. So we do try very, very hard to take the meetings, to listen to voices, particularly those that are marginalized.
Very quickly, Commissioner Johnson is still working on debates.
Yeah.
You've had a history, yin and yang. You presume you will be in the debates. Should Mr. Bernier also be allowed to participate in the national English language and French language debates?
Well, the criteria have been established. If he meets the criteria, he should be allowed to participate. Bear in mind, a lot of people forget that I was accepted and invited to participate in the televised national English language debate in 2015. And Tom Mulcair and Stephen Harper got it canceled. So I'm no longer clawing my way into the debates. We meet all the criteria. My only concern for this election year, and I would appreciate it if you would ask Andrew Scheer and Jagmeet Singh and get them on the record, will they participate? Because I don't want to find myself in the middle of a writ period once again, where having been invited to a national televised leaders debate, other parties conspire against fairness to get the debate canceled in order to shut down the Green voice. Est-ce qu'il y a les autres questions? Merci beaucoup. Nous restons ici. S'il y a les autres questions face à face, we'll wait around in case anybody wants to grab either Paul Manley or me for further questions. I just want to say, what a spectacular MP you're going to be. We're going to get sworn in soon. I don't know when it's going to be. Our seating arrangements have been confirmed, though, so don't read anything into it. There's no more room in the corner where I've been for the last 8 years. So Paul and I will be sitting next to Jane Philpott, Jody Wilson-Raybould, Hunter Tutu, and Selena Cesar Chavez. It's a good neighborhood, but it's just because they have trouble finding seats for us in the corner. So I'll have to say farewell to my dear seatmate, Maxime Bernier. He's been very collegial. I'm sure I'll miss him because he's very kind, but never mind. We all get along. Take care. Bye.